Well, good morning, everyone. Joining us this evening for me and morning for Tim. Uh, we are doing the whole yin and yang thing with our screens. As you can see, he is the dark side and I'm the light side. And so he will be playing Devil's Advocate today, and I will be playing the Apostle.
Jesus.
You're the backslider. You're the, I just before this, I was telling Tim that he looks a lot like a Rembrandt painting, like the prodigal son with the darkness there. So he's going to be playing the prodigal son, and I'm going to be trying to
My way
lure him
back.
back to the light side. So things are a little different today, but we're still super excited to get into this verse because it's a verse that's not really talked about that much, but I find it very interesting. And so, as we normally do, I am going to read first. We're going to do a minute of silence to think about the verse. And then Tim's going to read. And then, because we cut this one short, so we're not reading the whole chapter, I'm just going to do a small little summation of the rest of the chapter. So, grab yourself something to drink, get yourself cozy. We go, because I'm at night this time, I got wine.
Or that's what you usually have in your coffee cup.
Yeah, well, yeah. I poured water. I don't know what happened. Um, so
Jesus and the prodigal.
it's like that cartoon of like Jesus with a whole bunch of like his disciples around the table, and it's like, "Can we get another round of water?" Anyway,
Amazing.
so here we go. From there, Abraham journeyed toward the territory of Negeb and lived between Kadesh and Shur. And he sojourned in Gerar. And Abraham said of Sarah his wife, "She is my sister." And Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said to him, "Behold, you are a dead man, because of the woman whom you have taken, for she is a man's wife." Now Abimelech had once approached her, had not approached her. So he said, "Lord, will you kill an innocent people? Did he not himself say to me, 'She is my sister,' and she herself said, 'He is my brother'? In the integrity of my heart and the innocence of my hands, I have done this." And God said to him in a dream, "Yes, I know that you have done this in the integrity of your heart, and it was I who kept you from sinning against me. Therefore I did not let you touch her. Now then, return the man's wife, for he is a prophet, so that he will pray for you, and you shall live. But if you do not return her, know that you shall surely die, you and all who are yours." So Abimelech rose early in the morning and called all his servants, and told them all these things. And the men were very much afraid. Then Abimelech called Abraham and said to him, "What have you done to us? And how have I sinned against you, that you have brought on me and my kingdom a great sin? You have done to me things that ought not to be done." And Abimelech said to Abraham, "What did you see that you did this thing?" Abraham said, "I did it because I thought, there is no fear of God at all in this place, and they will kill me because of my wife. Besides, she is indeed my sister, the daughter of my father, though not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife. And when God caused me to wander from my father's house, I said to her, 'This is the kindness you must do to me. At every place to which we come, say of me, he is my brother.'"
From there, Abraham journeyed towards the territory of the Negev and lived between Kadesh and Shur. And he sojourned in Gerar. And Abraham said of Sarah his wife, "She is my sister." And Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said to him, "Behold, you are a dead man, because of the woman whom you have taken, for she is a man's wife." Now Abimelech had not approached her. So he said, "Lord, will you kill an innocent people? Did he not himself say to me, 'She is my sister,' and she herself said, 'He is my brother'? The integrity, the integrity of my heart and the innocence of my hands have done this." Then God said to him in the dream, "Yes, I know that you have done this in the integrity of your heart, and it was I who kept you from sinning against me. Therefore I did not let you touch her. Now then, return the man's wife, for he is a prophet, so that he will pray for you, and you shall live. But if you do not return her, know that you shall surely die, you and all who are yours." So Abimelech rose early in the morning and called all his servants and told them all these things. And the men were very much afraid. Then Abimelech called Abraham and said to him, "What have you done to us? And how have I sinned against you, that you have brought on me and my kingdom a great sin? You have done to me things that ought not to be done." And Abimelech said to Abraham, "What did you see that you did this thing?" Abraham said, "I did it because I thought, there is no fear of God at all in this place, and they will kill me because of my wife. Besides, she is indeed my sister, the daughter of my father, though not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife. And when God caused me to wander from my father's house, I said to her, 'This is the kindness you must do to me. At every place to which we come, say of me, he is my brother.'" Over to you, Derek.
Okay, so then Abimelech, he gives back Sarah to Abraham, plus male and female servants, and food and drink, and also 1,000 shekels of silver, which vindicates Sarah. And Abraham prays for Abimelech and all his wife, Abimelech's wife, and all his female servants. Wounds were open because the Lord had closed them while Sarah was there, which we won't get into, but I'm going to leave this question for our viewers, and you can comment down below. How did they know their wounds were closed? Like, how long did this interaction take? Was it like 3 days? And then how did they know? These are the real questions that need to be answered in the Bible. So if you have any ideas or thoughts, we would love to hear them from you. Tim, what are some thoughts and questions that you have about this?
Yeah, so I'd say the word and phrase that like hit me like just yeah kind of slapped me in the first time is when God comes to Abimelech and says, "Behold, you are a dead man because of the woman whom you have taken, for she is a man's wife." That was like um yeah, that certainly is kind of the most yeah the thing that jumped out at me the most in our readings.
That
About
Lord, will
yourself.
you kill an innocent man stuck out to me because, like, he's innocent and yet he's taking the brunt. Go ahead, sorry.
No, I was going to say, what was it for a word and phrase that jumped out at you? So
Um, I didn't look in. Yeah, like I don't know if a word or phrase. It's more the concept of Abraham, like the father of faith. He's left his family. He's done all these things. He doesn't have the faith that he won't die by someone who wants his wife,
yeah,
and
yeah,
that he is lying. Well, kind of like she is his
mm,
sister, which is a whole other thing. I guess that's okay back in those days. He's half sister, so it's totally cool.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, the like he doesn't have the faith to do this, and then Abimelech, like you're saying, innocent, and him protecting himself, Abraham, in doing this little white lie, actually causes a lot of harm to the
mm,
innocent person who's listening. Like we would think that lies, like you don't tell lies because someone will find out and get hurt, or you'll get hurt and stuff.
mm,
Um, but yeah, like it's like he's totally innocent. He's in the shadows like you are, and yeah, and God's like, you're gonna die. Like give this woman back, and the Lord protects him from sinning. Um, like I'm the one that prevented you from sinning against me.
mm, mm.
And so
So
does he do
is
that
there?
for us too? Like does he prevent
Mm,
us from sinning against him?
mm,
And when we do, is it because we have pushed so hard on something
mm,
or we ignore it? Like we're Abimelech, I know that's wrong. And instead of doing what I know is right, I'm going to keep going.
mm.
Anyway, so I don't really have a word or, I guess, word or phrase, but it's just
Yeah,
that
yeah.
whole concept.
Um, so is that is that kind of the biggest question that's on your mind after reading this? Is that kind of question about kind of what does it mean for to see the character of God stopping somebody from sinning, and is that something that we need to think a little bit more about in our
Yeah,
own life?
I would like to go into that because like he stopped him from sinning, and yet to bring up another story, talk about Pharaoh, he hardened Pharaoh's heart. And
Mm,
so he did go against God because God hardened his heart.
mm,
Now, was that based on because he already had it and he was making those decisions and then eventually
mm.
hardened himself? So yeah, I'm okay with going into that if you are.
Yeah, I think for me that kind of
I'm okay with
the
you
kind of
answering that if you are. I will just sit here and go like this.
oh gosh, yeah. That looks like a very other famous painting. Um,
We should let our viewers know that it is like 5 a.m. where you are, so
um,
be gracious.
it's just about six, so yeah,
Oh,
I'm losing all
no,
opportunity
no
to
excuses.
have yeah. Yeah, I think for me the kind of question, or kind of that thinking is in a similar vein is like um this whole story with the structure and characters doesn't feel like God and Abraham and like an evil person who doesn't have any fear of God. Like the three characters that seem to be set up from the beginning is this like godless king, the God of the universe and his servant Abraham, and none of those characters actually fit the mold that in my mind should be that way. And so, as you
Yeah.
say, then theologically and practically feel much more of a struggle for kind of what is this passage actually saying, and maybe wonder why we even picked it in the first place.
Yeah.
Let me put 20 minutes on the clock. Let me
Okay.
stop the screen share, and let's get into it.
Okay. I don't know how to.
You want to start us off?
I guess. What's the best way to do this? I'm trying to think of the best. Okay, so Abraham lies, right?
Yeah. Well, he tells a white lie. Tells
Tells a half lie because she's his half sister. And so Abimelech is, takes her. God says he's going to kill her, or he's going to kill him, and he prevents him from sinning against her so he could do it. So why did he not prevent Abimelech from taking her in the first place? What is this whole thing to teach Abraham something? Who put that desire for her in Abimelech's heart in the first place? Like, obviously he has some notion of a higher being, the Almighty God, if he's getting woken up and listening and being like, what have I done to you that you have done this to me?
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I think you're right. Like, it's so interesting because the person who we have the most isn't it like one of the longest kind of amount of speech comes from this character of God. Or I guess they're all fairly equal. We hear a lot actually from kind of people's own mouths. But as you say, like, it starts with this thing where this king who Abraham assumes is faithless and has no fear of God, comes and it just says, Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah, and which also I was thinking about that, in our last week when we were talking about, this is Sarah before she gives birth to Isaac, and
laughing.
but she's kind of written herself off, and what's interesting obviously is, like, Abraham, who, it's very appropriate that when people are in love, they think very highly of the one that they're in love with. Ironically, in Abraham's case, is the second time in his story where somebody has come and taken his wife and half sister, and try, in the hopes to actually make her their wife. And there's just what I find strange is, like, there's no kind of conversation around, was that kind of part of the kind of payment for Abraham to kind of be where he was, or traveling through where he was, did Abraham even say, oh, you don't need, why would you need another wife? Why, here's 1,000 donkeys or something, you know what I mean? Like,
when you're talking about she could be the payment, and you're walking through and you're telling people that to tell everyone that you're my sister, you're assuming that they're going to take her from you. So really, you're just like, whatever's going to happen to her is going to happen to her. Really, what you're doing is protecting yourself. If you're my wife, I'm going to die. If you're my sister, then it's okay. And let's not forget, I'm glad you brought up that the last video, because she's beyond childbearing age, right? Like, she's quite old at this time. Yeah. So a king that wants her is not wanting her for reproduction, for an heir or something. is something else, like it's companionship or something, which also
Mm.
lends to why he never knew her biblically, I guess. But she's not a spring chicken. Like it's not like Esther or something, right?
Mm.
She's older, so I
Yeah.
never really thought of that until right now.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. No, I think you're right, and I think, you know, I guess, and I think this is like, for me, this passage is so problematic, um, because like the character of God seems to be the one who's doing the most unjust, unmerciful things. You know, like who starts the conversation by saying, "You're a dead man," for doing something that I know you have, with integrity, not actually intentionally done. Like,
Yeah,
it just,
yeah.
you know,
Like the one redeeming thing is you got a chance to give her back and give him and make sure that he prays over you or you are dead. Like you better
yeah,
make sure
yeah,
that he prays for
yeah,
you
yeah,
because
yeah,
he's a
yeah,
prophet and you're gonna die.
yeah.
And yeah, and it also like if we're gonna talk about God is in control of everything,
Mm.
this verse is a tire fire of God being in control. Like he like the whole thing, like Abraham lying, Abimelech, everything that seems completely out of the character that we would understand God to be. But I
Yeah.
like these verses because it also makes you think, because we can get into a tunnel, I guess, of this is what God is, and this is how I understand God, and this is what He is to me. And then verses like this are like, no, the tunnel's actually bigger than you think. Like it's you can't put them into a little. One of my favorite memories, and I keep thinking about it, is when we were in Bible school. I was the year before you. I did a class with your dad
Mm.
called what was it called? Foundations or something like that. What or theology? The
Yeah,
theology one,
theology one.
the one that
Yeah.
everyone does. And we've got this giant blackboard that's like 3 blackboards long. And your dad's like, if we imagine this to be God, and he picks up a chalk and does a little dot, he's like, that's how much you're going to understand about God in your lifetime. And I keep going back to that because it's not like me. I can get in this tunnel vision of this is how God acts. This is what he is. And verses like this do it. Now, I will, or not preface that, but I will contradict my own self where I say that God is always on the side of love and mercy and justice. And yet this doesn't seem to be along those lines, right?
It's interesting too, because like what it makes me think about as well is what we're going to hear, you know, later on with the story of Jacob and Esau, which is again that the person who does the deceiving becomes the person through whom the one who has been deceived becomes blessed. Um, and 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 you're just like, and as you say, it's like, you know, whatever box you might have thought that kind of your understanding of God working in the world happened, at the very, very least, you have to look at this situation and say, you know, it doesn't seem to actually, like, God, the work of God in the world seems to be so much more than the people doing the right things publicly. And actually they're, you know, and I guess the other part like that it made me think of, which I think is kind of a default trigger in my brain, is like when passages like this came up before, you know, in the churches I grew up in, the first phrase, the first verse we would go to kind of find some justification for some kind of, you know, the kind of white lies or kind of cunningness of them was, you know, when Jesus says you must be as innocent as doves and as cunning as snakes. And there's a sense of like actually that, you know, we must be kind of, you know, kind of soft, gentle, peaceful people, but also have like an edge to us so that we're not being kind of like taken in by by the things going on in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's that other side, you know, where the thing I love about God's character in this one, even though I think I do think there are some problems with the way he kind of approaches the whole conversation. But it is that actually he and Abimelech do end up having a conversation, and there's something really really lovely, and really kind of encouraging, I think, about in Abraham's story as well, which is like where we actually even kind of become bold enough to have a conversation with God, and not just kind of sit here and be like, it's like, because again, I remember growing up and you pray for a Bible study or something. You spent all this time kind of praying that God would kind of basically strip you of any of your own ability to engage with the text, so that the only thing that you said about the text was the word for word of what God wanted to say to the people, which is like, I appreciate and understand that. But then where was the wrestling with the text? Where was the saying, okay, God, you said this, but what does that actually mean? Or like what am I meant to be taking from this? Or what does this mean for, like, a story like this? I'm sorry, but like, you've got where God says, I've stopped you from sinning against Abraham. Well, what about the amount of people who haven't, who have been victims of abuse that God hasn't stopped? What do we feel okay to tell God, like, that's not okay? It's not okay that in what we have as our holy scriptures seems to be you being very active in just one man's life, while there's other people suffering in the world. Or do we feel like that's an okay thing, like Abimelech, to say, like, actually, this is unjust? We feel that there's innocence, and that there's goodness, and there are people who are not being protected right now. And I'm sorry, God, but it's your fault.
That reminds me of the story of Elijah or Elisha. I can't remember which one, but the widow that bakes him the bread in
Elijah, yeah.
Elijah bakes him the bread in the famine, and it just keeps refilling. But what about all the other families? Like, she's gonna, get rid of her son. What about all the other families that are struggling with that too, right? Like, this is, I'm going through, or I was going through a Bible study with my church, and I took some cues from you through our conversations. And one of the questions I get people to ask themselves before we get together is, why is this verse in this story? Like, what is the author trying to get across in this? And when I look at this story, why is it in? Like, you could not have that in and no. Or what about the stories that didn't make it in, right?
Yeah.
But I like what you're saying about, like, I'm still having, when I left Bible school and now, I had a hard time with justifying a good God that is in control, that lets all these bad things happen. How does that work out? How does, like, Elijah and the widow there, or Abimelech here, or even his servants who wombs were closed because he took the wife, like, how are they part of this, right? How are all these things happening to these people who are innocent? And I know some people would say no one's innocent because we all live in a fallen world and all this kind of stuff, but that doesn't really answer the good part of God, right? The control of everything, and he's good, and yet this happens.
Yeah. And and I think like, there's a couple other links, I think, too, like, for us in our stories, which is like, we've got, what was I even thinking about? But like the whole thing with that's what, we were looking at Melchizedek a few weeks back, and this really, what I find really fascinating about the story of Abraham is, like, this is the second time where we've had, like, a direct intervention by somebody, or we've had a direct insertion of a character who does have a fear of God. Well, Abraham thinks he's the only one. And there's like, it goes back to, something that we've touched on before. So I'm, not going to kind of dig too far into it, but it's just that sense of like, every time you think, not just that God fits in this box, but actually that somehow, as you say, that kind of dot on the chalkboard gives us a sense of kind of power over other people because we know a truth that they don't know. Remember the story of Abraham, that the people who come into Abraham's life often fear God, as God has been revealed in scriptures to us. And Abraham finds himself often on the back foot, of having to accept a truth of other people responding to God that is not just him. And I think that's, as you say too, this guy who gets put up by I think it's the writer of Hebrews, no, it might be Paul, who kind of puts Abraham up, that like this pillar of our tradition is this great man of faith who by faith had done all of these things, and yet, as you say, doesn't have the faith to actually even kind of walk the journey without being afraid of being killed because his wife is somebody who will, others will be attracted to or will want, possession of, or whatever it might be. And yeah, and I think that's kind of, it's such an interesting kind of thread that I hadn't appreciated until we started reading this together. Is that kind of underpinning in the back, because we see that specific of kind of God calling Abraham, and then we think that God is kind of and I think maybe that's part of the question too, is like we see these like super specific situations where like God is at work in these. So what about all the other people? And I think part of the story is actually that we need to kind of constantly, open ourselves up and say, God is at work at other places, and engage with other people and doing things that are completely out of our control and our understanding. And maybe that's part of where our pushback comes from too, is like where we say, God, we know that you don't just love us. That when you said, that Jesus came for, that the world might be saved through him, we believe that is for all creatures and all people. So open my eyes to see what you're doing for other people, because right now I'm struggling because I feel like I'm sitting in a place of comfort and privilege, but I know that your love is bigger than that, and what the comfort and privilege is doing is making me kind of arrogant or prideful, and what I want to know is how I can be more humble, serve better, and see your spirit at work in the world.
That'll preach.
Sometime, maybe.
Sometime. Yeah, and to take it in a kind of different direction. Also, like Abraham, the importance of representing God, like Abraham's representing God, and he's lying. And we as Christians, when we represent God, I'm not saying you have to be perfect. I'm not saying you have to dress up in a suit everywhere and, sing hallelujah and do all these kind of things that we believe are Christian things. But integrity-wise, and our interactions with other people, we should be truthful and honest with them. Because, like you said, God is working in other ways. Like, how to say this? If Abraham had told the truth and he had talked with the king, that whole conversation would have been different, and that blessing would have been, I think, a little more meaningful, like a blessing as you go on, not a I have to do this to save your life kind of thing, right? And so I wonder, like, and he lied because he didn't see what God was doing outside of his own mind. And so us, and the fear of what's going on and the reaction of people, will sometimes hide who we are. And then we miss out on what God's doing. What is, like, there could be so much more, but we're too scared of what will happen to us if we're honest.
And there's interesting too, because like the kind of Abraham's conversation at the end of what we read this morning, also, it can be read in kind of two ways. Like, you can read it in a tone where he like doubles down and been like, look, I didn't want to die. I didn't think anybody here feared God. So I did tell you, and actually, you can take it for what it is. She actually is my sister. Okay. So I'm okay. Or you can read it in this, like, a man who's afraid and like, I am sorry. I was afraid for my life and thought you were going to kill me. She is my sister, but I understand why this has been so problematic. And obviously, you can read it whichever way you want to take it, but as you say, there's like this point of where, at least in the words, there is an acknowledgement and a recognition of something that has not been done with the integrity and honesty that we would, in a sense, expect from somebody like Abraham. Mm-hmm. And the irony is that the character who has got the most kind of the most integrity and kind of the strongest moral position in this story seems to be Abimelech, not God and not Abraham. And actually, as you say, there's that point of, where do we, can we hold ourselves in that place of humility to not just call people to something that we believe is life-giving and true, but also to recognize our own kind of humanity and sometimes, as you say, which I thought was, that sense of like, not trusting God outside of what we kind of understand and experience. I think that's really. Yeah.
I should say there's two ways that we are not ourselves. There's the rejecting it, like our faith completely and acting like it doesn't exist, or going super religious where you can't let anything unclean touch you and everyone's doing it. Like those are two ways. Like just be yourself. God created you. Be yourself. Be honest with people. And I think there's lots of opportunities out there. Like quick story. When I was at plumbing school, there was a guy sitting beside me, and we were asking some questions, and we ended up talking that we both done some post-secondary schooling. And so he was going to some party at this bar and invited me, and I went. And he was like, "Hey, what do you have your education in?" Like, I did business, and I was like, "Oh, I've got my bachelor's of biblical studies." And he's like, "Oh, so you're a Christian?" And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "So what can't you do?" And that was his first question to me, right? And so, like, obviously, so I'm like, I don't like to base on what can't I do. I'm more what I'm for: love, justice, peace, or whatever. But that whole thing started a conversation that lasted for the rest of the school year. And even texts afterwards where he just had all these questions and I was answering them and walking him through stuff and what I believed. And if I had not been honest with him, that opportunity never would have happened, right? And there's lots of other stories, and I'm sure people have had them themselves, but it's just, yeah. Anyway, I think this is all coming from I heard it said, like, I'm doing a chaplain course, and one of the guys had said that one of his favorite verses or favorite quotes from Saint Assisi is be the Bible to people, and if you need to, use words, something along those lines, like live your life. And I'm like, well, no, also use words, like do both. Like, it's people are going to be guessing, like there's got to be some kind of talk, right? Anyway, maybe I'm just on a what's it called, a kick of
yeah. I think we're definitely we've hit time, so we'll
that went way differently than I thought it was going to be. I took that like we're going this way, and I went, "Hey, let's go this way."
Let's just take a right hand turn. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think
didn't even
that
put on my
the
blinkers.
question. Yeah, I think that encouragement for us, as you say, is like, it's that we would be, bold, but in our boldness, continue to hold that humility, mercy, and love.
Mhm.
And that certainly would be, my prayer, and that we would, be bold, not just with other people, but actually bold to wrestle with God as well, just like Abimelech did.
And be bold to see where God is working outside of where you're at.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's all for this week. Blessings to you all. Next week, you said we're doing what?
Oh,
Oh,
what are we
sorry.
doing next?
Is it Jacob?
No, let me.
Okay.
Where are we here?
Sorry, threw you on the spot there. My bad.
And this is where we're
Next
not a
week is a
professional.
surprise.
Yeah,
What? Sorry, what?
So we've got Hagar, which is
Hagar.
another right hand turn in the story. So
God, you told me to be
Yeah.
a kid, have kids, so I'm going to sleep with my servant. Do what you got to do.
yeah, what can't you do? Well,
Take it in your own hands. Okay, well, blessings to you all. Have a great night from me, a
take
great
care.
day, Tim, and we'll see you next week.